Last time I gave a talk, I was talking to someone afterwards over dinner, and they asked me this question. Is this Hare Krishna thing, the thing that you're doing here, is it a religion? Because it doesn't quite seem like a religion. At the same time, there's so many aspects, it's confusing. So is it a religion or not? And while I answered something at that time, I can't really remember exactly what I said, but I thought about it, and I thought I really should do a talk on this, and clear it up once and for all. Is it a religion or not? And when people ask this question, I get asked it frequently. Generally some people are just genuinely curious, they're just not sure. Other people have had some bad experiences with religion in the past and want to avoid joining something like that right now. So, different kinds of experiences and different kinds of reasons for asking the question, but it's an interesting question, what do you think? To think about and contemplate. So, I'll give you the answer right now, straight up. The answer is no. Hare Krishna is the science of consciousness. Nothing to do with religion whatsoever. And, simultaneously, the answer is yes. Absolutely. In fact, it's not just a religion, it's a perfection of religion. So some of you are thinking now, hello, Mr. with a PhD. Don't you realize that you have a PhD in formal logic? Don't you realize that's like a logical contradiction? Perhaps superficially, but it'll all make sense. We're just getting started. Way back when, about 15 years ago, when I first came across this Krishna consciousness, I was studying at the University of Southampton in the UK. There I am, in some of the initial meetings that I had at the university. And the person sitting next to me in the white jumper, in one of the first meetings, went around the room, and he asked everyone, do you believe in God? And most people were like, I'm not sure, and don't really know, maybe not. And it came around to me, and I said, no. Absolutely not. And they went, okay. But then they explained this whole thing, is it a religion or not? Is it both? Is it consciousness science? And that's partially why I stayed with it, even though I said no to that question. And even today, I wouldn't necessarily think of myself as religion. It's complicated. A couple of weeks ago, I got this letter in the mail at my house. And I looked at this and go, yeah, like you, I had a reaction of, oh, here we go. Do I really want to open this? Had this kind of stuff before. So yeah, I thought maybe I can use it in a talk in the future. So yeah, I opened the letter, read like the 5 pages of note that it was. And it was a long rambling letter about how you are automatically baptized by simply hearing the message of Jesus. Jesus, that automatically baptizes you. And while I certainly appreciate the effort whoever wrote this went through handwriting everything, putting it in a nice envelope, distributing it in people's letterboxes, it just doesn't do anything for me. Don't know about you. I mean, you might be more open-minded than me, but I'm like clearly sincere, clearly completely wrong approach to convince me of anything. So, this religion thing, I just don't get it. I don't like it. It's not for me. So, if we're going to talk about is this Hare Krishna a religion or not, first we need to define our terms of what is religion and maybe what is science. So, I looked them up in the dictionary. Religion is belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power. From the Latin, religiare, to link. And science is the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the world through observation and experiment. So intellectually and practically experimenting with the world and figuring stuff out. From, again, Latin, scientia, to know. So science appeals to me a lot more than religion. I don't want to believe in something for no reason. I want to and worship something because I believe in it. I want to intellectually and practically do stuff to figure out what the nature of the world is and base my activities on that. And yet, here I am, practicing this Krishna consciousness for 15 years. And one Krishna consciousness, or Hare Krishna, the word Krishna is like the blue boy, God, who 5,000 years in India had all kinds of interesting things happening to him. And it's like, isn't that like religion? You'd be forgiven for thinking, okay, so you have this adorable God that you worship. Isn't that a religion? Yes, no, maybe? So, what is it, basically? And I'll hopefully answer that in my talk today. So, the main question that we need to consider to get this apparent contradiction of religion at the same time as not religion, at the same time as consciousness science, is, are we our material body, and is our consciousness therefore material or non-material? So, if we are not our physical body made out of matter, and the brain is not us, if there's something more to us than just our brain and our body, then that means our consciousness is not made out of matter. It's spiritual or non-material or whatever you want to call it. Then everything slots into place, and Krishna consciousness becomes this consciousness science, because Krishna consciousness is all about understanding. Consciousness is the thing in the second word in the name. It's all about understanding your consciousness in a scientific way. But if Krishna consciousness, if we are simply the physical body that we inhabit, then all this belief in consciousness and a higher consciousness and consciousness separate from the body, that just becomes a belief. That's not a science anymore. So it all boils down to this fundamental question of, are we our body or are we something else? If we're something else, then it's not a religion, it's the most supreme science, because what's more fundamental than our own consciousness, who we are, what is our own, how we perceive the world, what is the fundamental unit of being that we are? If studying that should be the most interesting field of science that anyone could partake in studying. So, but what do I mean by this non-material consciousness thing? How can you imagine that? Well, I found a clip from a recent movie, Doctor Strange. Hope you enjoy it.
I know how to reorient the spirit to better heal the body.
The spirit to heal the body. All right, how do we do that? Where do we start?
Don't like that map?
Oh no, it's really good. It's just, I've seen it before in gift shops.
What about this one?
Acupuncture, great.
Yeah. What about that one?
Showing me an MRI scan. I don't believe this.
Each of those maps was drawn up by someone who could see in part, but not the whole.
I spent my last dollar getting here. One-way ticket, and you're talking to me about healing through belief.
You're a man looking at the world through a keyhole. You've spent your whole life trying to widen that keyhole, to see more, to know more. And now, on hearing that it can be widened in ways you can't imagine, you reject the possibility.
No, I reject it because I do not believe in fairy tales about chakras or energy or the power of belief. There is no such thing as spirit. We are made of matter and nothing more. You're just another tiny, momentary speck within a different universe.
You think too little of yourself.
Oh, you think you see through me, do you? Well, you don't. But I see through you!
I pushed your astral form out of your physical form.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
Just tea. With a little honey.
What is that?
For a moment, you entered the astral dimension.
What?
A place where the soul exists apart from the body.
Why are you doing this to me?
To show you just how much you don't know. Open your eyes.
So, if you're like Dr. Strange there, and you don't believe in anything, like you said, we're just chemicals, we're just this matter, and there's nothing else but matter in the universe. But I will attempt to show you, well, this is just a movie, of course, but I will attempt to show you some real-life evidence that maybe, just maybe, there is more to our world than what we get taught in school. But for now, let's define consciousness according to the Bhagavad Gita. For consciousness, there is neither birth nor death at any time. It has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. It is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. It is not slain when the body is slain. The consciousness is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. So this gives a scientific definition of consciousness according to Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the prime yoga texts of ancient India, describing nature of our world. But, okay, fine. Consciousness is this non-material thing that transcends birth and death. Can you prove it? Well, here is some of the promised evidence. I could talk for hours on this, but there's near-death experiences. I gave a talk on that in the past, which are really badly named things. They're more like actual death experiences, because in a near-death experience, the person's actually dead. Their heart stops, their brain stops, flatlines, and then they come back to life. So while nothing is going on in their brain and their heart is not beating, they have some experience, which shouldn't be possible. And past life memories, of course, telepathy, communicating over distances. Placebo effects, various types of healing that occur that shouldn't, someone cured of cancer, deadly cancer instantly. The famous double-slit experiment, and some random number generating experiments, which I'll go into detail on the last two, but ask me over dinner about the other ones if you're interested. Yeah, question?
By this definition you showed just
Yeah.
on the page before, it's everywhere, it's unchangeable and eternally the same. That's like, I mean, stagnation is death, and everywhere means kind of nowhere. Like, I'm not really convinced by this definition. Like, it's, I think, very loose. I mean, half of it is like what it is not, and the other half is like that it's always stagnating and that it's just everywhere. That's
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But I would say, well, one thing of defining something, you have to negate. Defining negation helps you understand what it is by positive. And this is not the only thing that Bhagavad Gita says about consciousness. It goes on and on, many verses. But everlasting, present everywhere, unchanging, unchangeable, meaning doesn't age, not necessarily that there's stagnation, that there's no activity. Immovable, can push it around, and eternally the same, meaning again, not aging, not degrading, not changing, not that there is no activity, which you get into as you study Bhagavad Gita somewhere. But the important thing is to understand, does this consciousness exist as a non-physical force, or does it not? Which is the scientific worldview of today of consciousness is just matter. It's an illusion that our brain tricks us that we are conscious. So let's briefly go into who here has heard of the double slit experiment? Yeah, a few people. Let's just briefly recap it and then go into something which you haven't heard of, probably the Global Consciousness Project with random number generators. Anyone heard of that? No? Yeah, possible. Okay.
In the double slit experiment, particles are sent through a laser towards two slits in the barrier. Particles act not like physical objects, but as a wave of potential, actually occupying all possible states. As this wave of potential passes through the two slits, its ability to interact with itself accumulates in a wave signature forming on the plate at the back. This is known as an interference pattern. However, when we attempt to gain knowledge about the path of the particles as they travel through the slits, their behaviour changes entirely. When we observe the particles, they no longer behave as a wave, but as a physical object that travels a single determinable path. This change in behaviour is evident on the plate, where the particles' impact points now form in the shape and size of the two slits. This surprising change from potential to physical happens every time the experiment is run. Simply knowing the path of the particles seems to affect their behaviour.
Just briefly, the double slit experiment is, as soon as there's some consciousness that observes or has the possibility of observing in the future how the experiments run, the experiment changes. And physical reality changes from one pattern to another pattern in the experiment. So the consciousness has the consciousness that's supposed to be entirely encompassed in people's heads is somehow affecting this laser going through a slit at a distance. And it's like, what? How? Doesn't make sense from a material scientific point of view. But even weirder, let's look at the Global Consciousness Project.
The question of consciousness is way too big for one video. I could do an entire YouTube channel on it. I won't. I've got enough to do right now. But the biggest debate about consciousness is whether or not it's internal or external. Is it all inside our own skull? Just the random firings of hundreds of billions of neurons in an emergent phenomenon that we can't quite see? Or is it something else? Something woven into the fabric of the universe and an emergent phenomenon that, well, we can't see. Now, I know for some of you, this episode is going to be a bridge too far, so for you, I'm going to hit the patently woo-woo alarm. But keep watching, because it does get pretty interesting. So in 1976, at Princeton University, a graduate student reached out to the Dean of Engineering, Robert Johns, with an interesting idea. She wanted to do her thesis on whether or not the human mind can create patterns in random mechanical systems. She wanted to use a random number generator. A random number generator is basically a coin flipping machine, except instead of heads and tails, it's ones and zeros. And it does it 200 times a second. So you could get the kind of numbers in 10 seconds that would take you hours if you were flipping a coin. Plus, the larger sample size gives you more opportunities to see patterns in the randomness. This, obviously, is a controversial topic. And Robert Johns was a rocket engineer. He had no experience in anything like this. So he basically told her, look, you do an experiment, and if I find it convincing, I'll let you do it. The results of her experiments were so convincing that he not only let her do it for her thesis, he created an entire lab at Princeton to study this phenomenon. The double slit experiment, for example, showed that our conscious observation can change the behavior of subatomic particles. What if that extended out into the physical world? And could these random number generators pick up on that? He began testing with groups of people. People doing something together, like watching a movie or a sporting event or meditating. Sometimes they knew they were part of an experiment, sometimes they didn't, but his research began to turn up some really interesting conclusions. Focused attention amongst groups of people, especially in heightened emotional states, led to patterns in the randomness that shouldn't exist. So he hatched an idea. To place these random number generators in cities all around the world and monitor them 24/7 to see if there are any correlations between world events and spikes in the number patterns. And the Global Consciousness Project is one. Over and over again, major world events have correlated with spikes in the random numbers around the world, often showing stronger intensity according to the proximity to the event and the intensity of the emotions surrounding the events. Beginning, 9/11 was witnessed by more people on the planet than any other traumatic event in world history. A fact that was reflected in the results by the Global Consciousness Project. The patterns not only went off the chart, the spike lasted several days, finally settling back into randomness around the 15th. This is considered by many involved to be the most spectacular example of this phenomenon, but it's not just because of the intensity of the result. There was a surprise in the numbers from that day, one that has so far defied explanation. Look at that chart again. You might have been wondering when you were looking at this chart earlier what this line is. This line marks 8:46 a.m., the moment the first plane hit. Notice something interesting here? The spike had already begun well before that. In fact, the spike began 3 hours before the plane hit. What the? Was the collective emotion in 9/11 so strong it caused a temporal distortion in the fabric of consciousness? Did it cause a shift in space-time itself? Are all of our brainwaves flying away from our head and combining with other people's brainwaves to form this vast ocean of consciousness? Is there some emergent consciousness at the fundamental quantum level that we can interact with in some way? Is this the brain of the string theorists are talking about? Or is our consciousness a fundamental part of our physical world, not only reacting to it, but shaping it? Are these words actually coming out of my mouth?
So yeah, he speaks really fast and talks about a lot of science, but it's... When I found out about this Global Consciousness Project, I was like, whoa. Yeah.
Excuse me, what did the graph exactly show? Like the numbers?
So you have a random number generator that either tells you 0 or 1 randomly, and you get 50% 0, 50% 1 normally, but suddenly you're getting like 80% ones from the number generator during 9/11, which started before the planes even hit, for some reason. And after the planes hit, it went like up to 90% ones. And it's like, why is this number generator suddenly no longer producing random numbers? And it's just a machine, electronic, it's a computer in a box. Yes?
Which scale are these like anomalies measured? Like, I mean, this whole graph didn't really show like how many number generators in how many cities were actually part of the statistic. Like, which scale?
I haven't looked into it in that detail, but if you look up the Global Consciousness Project, it's run out of Princeton University. It's not like a quack science thing. You can find out, I'm sure. Detailed papers on the subject. Okay, so if we turn to Bhagavad Gita and try and understand why, how could consciousness possibly know or feel something before something even happens? And how could that influence the world? Bhagavad Gita has, or Srimad Bhagavatam actually, which is the graduate study of Bhagavad Gita, has some thoughts on the subject. Explains that the flames of a fire appear and disappear at every moment, and yet this creation and destruction is not noticed by the ordinary observer. Similarly, the mighty waves of time flow constantly like the powerful currents of a river, and imperceptibly cause birth, growth, and death of innumerable material bodies. And yet, the consciousness, who is thus constantly forced to change its position, cannot perceive the actions of time. Because, as we heard before, consciousness is immovable. It's not shaped by time. So there you can understand that consciousness can perceive things outside of time because it itself is not affected by time. So then, if you want to claim that this Krishna consciousness knows about is consciousness science, then you will rapidly get into how. Oh, should I get into this? No, ask me about it later. Creation of the universe and all that. Gets quite complicated. Or are you interested? Who's interested in the creation of the universe? Okay. So, there's the standard scientific model of how the universe is created. And then there is the Krishna conscious model of how consciousness interacts with the material world and creates the universe, which is completely different to the material point of view, and yet aligns with it. So just ever so briefly, because it's you can read books on it. It's complicated. You have Krishna in Shroga Shakti, who through his Samvit potency produces the first quadruple expansion of Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankeshan, which then results in Vaikuntha Loka being manifest with all the Narayan expansions and the second quadruple expansion of Mahashankathan, Pradyumna, Vasudeva, and Aniruddha again, which then produces Mount Kailash, where Sadashiva emanates the Brahma Jyoti, which is Krishna's effulgence, which produces the Karana ocean, in which Karana Dakshai Vishnu emits multiple universes as multiple independent Pali universes. One of these small universes is our own, in which there are a total of 14 separate dimensions, only one of which we can perceive, which is Earth, Burloka, in the center. Our earthly dimension is the universe we can observe, whereas higher and lower planets are in a separate realm that we cannot perceive, all produced from Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who produces Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma shapes the entire universe according to Krishna's plan. Everybody got that? Compare that to the standard material current understanding of universal creation. Quantum fluctuations, which is another word for we have no idea, creates a Big Bang, where all matter in the universe starts and all time starts in a single point. Then there's a period of cosmic inflation, where the universe expands faster than the speed of light for no reason other than to make the math work. And and then there's nothing much happens as the universe rapidly cools and expands. Then first stars begin to form as gravity pulls energy together. And there's a question about why, where the non-uniformity in the universe first came from, but that's still to be decided. And then gradually more stars and galaxies form over billions of years. And the universe gradually accelerates more quickly in its expansion, which is the dark energy that is 74% of the universe is dark energy, which is this unknown thing that's pushing the universe apart. And 23% of the universe is dark matter, which is this unknown matter that pulls the universe together, that no one knows what it is. And only 4% of the universe is matter as we know it today, as we know it, like matter that we're made out of, all the material elements. So astronomers freely admit that one of the great unknowns is what is this 96% of the universe that's dark matter and dark energy? We can't observe anything about it, yet we can see by its side effect that it's there. And we have no idea. But 4% we have a pretty good grasp of. So there's a lot of holes a lot of unknowns, I wouldn't say holes, in the material scientific description of the universe. And that only tells you about one universe. It doesn't explain the why the universe is here. It doesn't explain multiple parallel universes. Not to mention all the 14 separate dimensions that the Krishna model of consciousness creating the universes and multiple universes explains. So, knowing this, knowing how much, the first aspect of knowledge is knowing how little you know. So, as scientists were uncovering quantum mechanics back like in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, as they were discovering this quantum world double slit experiment, how consciousness has an effect on the material, on physical matter. They appreciated, and there was all these scientists at that time were studying this Krishna knowledge. They appreciated that there was something there. So one of a quote I really like from Werner Heisenberg, who was one of the principal founders of quantum mechanics. Who's heard of Heisenberg? Scientist? Yeah, few people. He said this: The first gulp from the glass of science will turn you into an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting. So the logic is quite simple. If we are consciousness, and consciousness is non-material, consciousness is spiritual, then we are actually fundamentally spirit. And therefore, the spirit is the most important field of science. Studying the spirit is the most important field of science ever. Therefore, the field of knowledge, Krishna consciousness, that's talking about ourselves as spiritual consciousness, that is fundamentally a science, not a religion. However, this brings us to another aspect of Bhagavad Gita, where in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, this knowledge is the king of education, it is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion, it is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. Okay, so it goes on forever, it's been around outside of time, it's fun, which helps. You like doing it, you like learning about it, generally, most people do. And it's the king of education, purest knowledge. Why? And it's this perfection of religion, this thing that I mentioned before. It's not just the religion, it's the perfection of religion. Because it gives direct perception of the self by realization. Because it gives direct perception of the self by realization. And what is this? How does this direct perception come about? Later on in Bhagavad Gita, it says, some perceive the self within the self through the consciousness, through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without selfish desires, which is known as karma yoga or bhakti yoga. So you can try meditating, you can try reading and understanding knowledge, you can try practical devotional service, all of which produce a realization of this consciousness within the self. And the thing that makes it not traditional religion, but perfection of religion, according to Bhagavad Gita, is because you get direct perception. It's not belief, like our definition from before. It is practical. So, meditation, japa meditation, any of our practitioners here can teach you how to do japa meditation. You can do it every day. I do it every day. The kirtan music meditation that we'll do in a moment, bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, all of these are practical activities you can do that result in realization that, oh my God, I never knew. I'm consciousness. I'm not this body. I thought I was this body all along, but I'm starting to understand that I'm something else. And the more you get this, the more you practice the science of Krishna consciousness through practical activity or study of the various books that are available here at the left, the more you understand this is not a belief. I'm getting realization and understanding through practical experience, through scientific experimentation of the consciousness as something non-material. It's like acupuncture in that way, or sports. You don't have to believe it for it to work. It just works. You can believe or not believe in acupuncture, and yet a Chinese doctor can put needles in you and pain goes away. And you can believe or not believe in exercise, but if you lift weights, you get stronger. It's the same. You can believe or not believe in Krishna and consciousness and anything. In fact, it's actually really good if you don't believe. You're actually stupid if you believe in something without any practical realization. Bhagavad Gita discourages blind faith. Far better is to do the practical activity and see does it produce the result. So, on that point of acupuncture, I found a really great another video, which I'd like to show. Does anyone here know who Scott Forstall is? No. Anyone know who the company Apple that makes these things. Yes. Scott Forstall was the vice president in Apple in charge of 10 years ago producing the first iPhone, the software for the iPhone. So, and he's the man behind the iPhone, creating the iPhone, and he was very close to Steve Jobs, the Apple founder. And he has a story of what happened to him some years ago. It's really touching.
And it was when we were deep into macOS 10, right before we started the iPhone. And I got sick. This virus went through my kids' school. And everyone at school, a lot of kids at school got sick. They threw up once and then they were better. And it hit me a few days later. And I started throwing up. Once every few hours, once an hour, day after day. Week passed, second week passed. I was throwing up every 15 minutes. I lost 5 pounds, then 10 pounds, then 20 pounds, then 30 pounds. I went into the hospital. They couldn't solve it. They finally figured out what it was, and it's a very rare thing where the Mayo Clinic, it's in 7 cases over like a decade, and most of those people died.
But it was a virus.
Well, a virus that stops your stomach from working. And just certain people, like, it stops your stomach. So I'm in there, and I'm dying. I'm in the hospital, I'm dying. And Steve calls every single day, asking how things are going. But if I couldn't talk, I'd talk to my wife. And at this point, I'm throwing up every 5 minutes. I just want to die. I wanted to die. They gave me every medicine they could that they give to people with cancer treatment to try to stop the nausea. Nothing helped. And I'd sit there like holding my finger, like wanting to break it so I could feel pain as opposed to nausea and concentrate on something else. And one night, about 10 o'clock at night, now this is now months into it, Steve calls up about 10 o'clock at night and he says, I have the best acupuncturist in the world, and I'm going to bring her to you tonight, and she's going to fix you. I'd never done acupuncture. I didn't have any reason to believe it would work or wouldn't work. At this point, I thought if someone come shake a stick over me, I'm in. I had very young kids who just saw their dad disappearing and dying. So he comes into the hospital about midnight, comes in with his acupuncturist and gets through everyone. Comes to my office, into my room, holds my hand, starts talking to me, and he's like, she's gonna fix it. I'm throwing up while he's there. I mean, it's just awful. And she comes over and I said, does it matter if I believe this? Because I don't know if I do. I mean, I can try. Do I need to try to do this going to work? She just looked at me and she said, I'm going to manipulate your involuntary system. Doesn't matter what you think. I'm going to fix you. I like the chutzpah. And she started sticking needles in my head, my back. Nausea went away.
Like, immediately.
It immediately started going away. She was there. They were there hours until sunrise. And for the first time in more than 2 months, I didn't throw up for 8 hours straight. They left at sunrise, came back a few hours later. She did it again. I never threw up again. I drove. They let me out of the hospital the next day. She came to my house, did it. I got hungry that day. My mom baked fresh bread. I ate for the first time in 2 months. I was 100% dying, and Steve brought this person to me and saved my life. So I will always, always owe him that.
What did the Stanford doctors say?
It's interesting. It actually depended on their age. People right out of med school think they've been taught the entire corpus of medicine, and they didn't believe it. Oh, you just happen to get better at this time. Any doctor over 50 said, there's a lot we don't know.
Yes. So, just like acupuncture, you don't have to believe Krishna consciousness for it to work. Try it. See what happens. So back to our definition. Belief and worship of a superhuman controlling power. Don't need to believe. It's actually far closer to the original meaning of religion, the Latin, where it means to link, means to connect. By practicing this Krishna consciousness, you are connecting with a superhuman controlling consciousness. Therefore, you have the experience. So, not a religion in the traditional sense of the word, in the contemporary sense of the word at least. And very much a science in that there's intellectual activity, there's study of so many books, there's practical activity of meditation, and action, and you can observe and do the experiment yourself. And actually, so the end result looks superficially like a religion, but actually under the hood, when you understand what's going on, it's not a religion and a religion at the same time. And actually, religion and the original meaning of religion, to link, and the original meaning of yoga mean exactly the same thing. They're both to link in different language. So practicing yoga in all its various forms, not just the physical exercise, means to link, to connect with a superhuman controlling power, superhuman consciousness, and therefore experience yourself as being a non-material being. And if you read all of Bhagavad Gita and come to the end, the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is this: abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all misfortune. Do not fear. So this is the same book that a couple of chapters earlier said this is the perfection of religion, and now it's saying throw away all religion and just forget about it. But it's not a contradiction, because throw away all contemporary definitions of religion, everything that you might think is so-called religion, and practice this thing that is actually connecting you with a supreme consciousness, and therefore causing this direct experience by scientific process of realization. Of course, there's nothing wrong with believing in Krishna if you want, except that Krishna tells you, don't believe in me. So, by practicing yoga, by practicing linking, by practicing consciousness science, by practicing Krishna consciousness, you can achieve the perfection of religion and be fully scientific at the same time. And everything works out. Thank you very much. Any questions?